What if everyone in the world had epic fantasy powers? That is what we are going to explore today in the continuation of our Come World Build With Me series. So if you don't know, in this series, basically, I am walking through the creation of the fantasy world of Petrus for my next Christian fantasy epic series. In each video, we are exploring different elements of this world. We started out with the beginning, creation, and we've gone through the fall in this world. Then last time we explored some of the setting. Now I want to get into what happens next in this second age, which I am tentatively calling either the Age of Wickedness or the Age of Gods. Either way, things ain't gonna be too good. But, as we talked about in a previous video, this world's fantasy version of the Tree of the Knowledge of Good and Evil is this crystalline tree that has 6 crystals in it, each contain a different set of powers. The children of the Adam and Eve figures take these crystals and embed them in their chest, giving them power, leading to the fall, and all of their descendants, all of their children, will be born with their own crystal inside their chest. So today I thought we could talk about what are the different powers and how that's all going to work. So this was actually very tricky to do because I wanted everyone to have powers, but I had to figure out how to differentiate the powers between the tribes, but also for the individual people, because if everyone's power is exactly the same, that's kind of boring. Plus, I had to decide, okay, what does it look like for some people in the tribes to have more power versus less? And how do I give limitations for the powers? Because, at least for me, I've found that I write much better when I have limitations. And so if I can not just have this limitless power that I don't know what to do with, and instead force myself into a narrow box where these are all of the things that these tribes can't do, that ends up being a significantly more interesting and engaging story. The writing advice I've heard about this is the most interesting stories about Superman are the ones about the things he can't do instead of the things he can. And that is true in most things when it comes to storytelling, especially when it comes to magic and power. So before we actually get into the specifics of the different tribes with all their cool powers and everything, we have the hierarchy of power. So what I'm thinking for this is that not everyone is just born super powerful and can do whatever they want. That's going to be boring and difficult to write. Instead, we're going to have basically 5 different levels of power. You're going to have the lesser born, which is about 25% of the population, the common born, which are going to be 55% of the population, the greater born, which are 17%, the highborn, which are about 2%, and then the primarchs, which are about 0.1%. Each one is going to have significantly more power than the earlier level, the very, very small few having this crazy ultimate power. At the same time, the more power one has, my thought is that they would have significantly shorter lifespans. So the lesserborns would live to be around 80 to 100, a normal lifespan, but the higherborns are going to only live to be around 30 to 45. And the primarchs, the greatest ones that have the most amount of power, are only going to live to be around 15 to 30, which is a very short lifespan. My thought in doing this is that, yes, they're going to have great power, but they're going to have a very limited amount of time to actually use it. And that power is going to come with a cost. It always bugs me in fantasy stories when there's this crazy limitless power that has no cost to it, where it's just easy to use and there are no real consequences to this. What do you think? Is 15 to 30 a little too harsh though? Or do you think that fits well with this idea of this power having a cost to it? Another cost I'm thinking about adding is having some mental illnesses attached to the different tribes, where the highborns and the primarchs, those with a lot of power, are more vulnerable to having power-induced mental illness, basically. Thinking of calling it the cracking. Basically, as they use their power, it starts to wear on not only their body, as we see with the lifespans, but also their brain. So maybe they'll start to have hallucinations or memory loss or emotional instability. I think that this makes some opportunities for some great stories and some interesting dynamics where maybe we have a character that is super powerful but refuses to use their power because they're worried about the cracking happening to them. Or maybe we have a super powerful character who does use their powers and they start to get very unstable. Things get dangerous not only for them but for the world around them because of the instability. Okay, now let's go ahead and get into the specific tribes and powers. First off, we have the Reprim, which has the red power crystal, and they have limited powers of creation and transformation. I didn't want to give them just limitless powers to create whatever they want, because that's going to be difficult to write. Maybe some of the more powerful ones can just create things, but most people would just have the ability to reforge or manipulate matter. Maybe some of them can only change certain types of materials or can reforge things into a specific type of material. Like maybe they can only reforge things into sand, and their specific power is I can turn walls or whatever it might be into sand or ice or something like that, or gold maybe. Or maybe I can only turn sand into other things. If it's another object, if it's made out of another material, oh well, too bad. We only got sand for you. Another thing I'm thinking about incorporating for the different tribes is having some sort of emotional tie-in for the tribes, where there is an emotional trigger that helps fuel someone's power. And maybe there's a disruptor that can limit someone's power, like if they're afraid or something. Perhaps there's a virtue that when they possess this virtue, then they can tap into a more powerful and more controlled version of their ability, but it's much harder to do. I don't know. What do you guys think of that? I think it's a cool idea, but I'm trying to figure out the execution. It's been a little tricky figuring out what would go with each of the tribes / powers. For the red tribe, I'm thinking of the emotional drive being desire. So this passion and ambition and longing is what is fueling their power and ability to create and reform things. The disruptor would be shame, so that regret and shame disrupting their abilities and causing what they're reforging to become unstable. And then the ultimate virtue they'd be able to master would be patient, this steadfast vision where those can walk with patience and steadfastness in reforging, as opposed to having to rely on desire or being stopped by shame. I don't know. What do you think of that? I thought that the virtues could correlate with the fruits of the spirit, but it's been a little difficult connecting them. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on that. All right, for the next tribe, we have the Lutus tribe, the ones with the orange crystal, and they have intelligence and ingenuity. They have accelerated cognition and creative potential, but what I wanted to make sure to do with this is not just have all of these characters be super smart in mathematics or something. I wanted to have some diversity and personality and power sets. So what I was thinking is that they would all excel in very specific areas. So maybe you have one from the Luteus tribe who is a genius in mechanical designs. Maybe one is more mathematically smart. Maybe one is more creative. You have an artist and someone who is a genius in art and creativity alongside someone who is more traditionally intellectually intelligent. Either way, this all kind of correlates as the intelligence and ingenuity tribe. My thought was for our emotional trigger that it would be curiosity. I figured that makes sense. That emotion of curiosity driving them to explore and to dive into and study things. Meanwhile, the disruptor would be doubt, overwhelming and blocking their creativity and ingenuity. And then for the virtue, I was thinking joy would work as their fruit of the spirit, the way to unlock the fullness of their power. That idea of holy wonder, where insight flows from co-creation with God, where instead of just being driven by curiosity and not caring about where it leads or where that desire is coming from or going, ultimately that desire coming out of of a holy wonder and joy that is connected with God, or as we're calling him in this world, the everlasting one. For our third tribe, we have the Veridins, which has the green crystal. And for these, I'm thinking control over nature, where some would have control specifically over plants, some would be over animals, and some would be over like the forces of nature, maybe rain and storms and that kind of thing. But of course, we have to have limitations. So my thought would be maybe, except for the ones that are more powerful, the average person from this tribe would only be able to connect with and control one type of animal, or one type of plant, or one force of nature, or maybe a couple as they get more powerful. Just so it's not like, okay, you can solve all of humanity's problems by instantly making a massive harvest of food. That would make things way too easy. In fact, all of these have the opportunity of making things way too easy and solving all of the problems, so that's why I gotta add lots of limitations. I'm also thinking that it might make sense for them to be region bound. Like maybe they bond with a specific climate or a specific region in this world. Maybe their power only works in the Frostlands or in the canyons or whatever it might be. For the trigger for their power, I'm thinking empathy being the emotional drive, that connection between them and the world around them being what allows them to connect with and use their power. And then the disruptor to that would be grief. If someone who is super powerful and is kind of controlling a region of nature, perhaps if they are grieving, then the physical world around them starts to decay and die. And then for their virtue, for the fruit of the spirit, I was thinking love. Those who create in love instead of control would be able to be more powerful and be able to make the world around them thrive in a better, more healthy way. All right, so those are the first 3 tribes. Stay tuned because next time we're going to talk about the last 4 tribes in the world of Petrus. Let me know what you think so far. Do you have any thoughts?